my mind is blown right now. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Maricris, and for today's video, we are going to continue the booktube series Brown Skin, White Minds, Filipino American Post-Colonial Psychology by E.J.R. David. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad we're continuing on this book, and we're going on the chapter 5, colonial mentality and psychological impact of colonialism. Wow. Okay, but before we get started, it has this part 2 aftermath that I would like to read. And just to make this quick, all of the links of my videos down below, why I want to do this booktube series, everything will be linked down below, all the series that I have done so far. Let me make sure I'm recording. Okay, I'll be back. I saw on my feed, I'm like so bright. I don't know why I'm so bright. So hopefully this is a little bit better. So let's continue on the series, part 2, the aftermath. In the field of psychology, particularly in ethnic minority psychology, the psychological consequences of oppression have received some scientific attention. Internalized oppression, a condition in which an oppressed individual or group come to believe that they are inferior to those in power or who are part of the dominant group, has been identified by various psychological oppression. Historically, in ethnic minority psychology, the concept of internalized oppression and Historically, in ethnic minority psychology, the concept of internalized oppression and its psychological implications have mostly been investigated as experienced by African Americans. For instance, Thomas theorized that internalized racism or internalized oppression among African Americans leads to identity confusion and to the development of an inferiorized identity, which he called the nigromachy. The seminal Black identity development model proposed by Cross, Parham, and Helms in 1991 also argued that internalized racial oppression may lead African Americans to highly value the dominant culture and simultaneously devaluate their own, leading many African Americans to hold anti-Black sentiments or have Black self-hate. In terms of its mental health implications, it has been empirically demonstrated that racial oppression is negatively related to African Americans' physical and mental health. More recently, internalized oppression has also been argued to be common among members of sexual minority populations. For example, in his minority stress model for lesbian, gay, and bisexual individuals, Meyer in 2003 argued that experiences of discrimination based on sexual orientation and the need to conceal one's sexual orientation, an important and salient part of oneself or identity, negatively influences LGBT individuals' mental health. Sexual orientation is internalized homophobia, a specific form of internalized oppression. I haven't even heard of that term. I didn't know it was a thing. Wow. Anyways, let's continue. Internalized oppression in which LGBT individuals eventually redirect negative homophobic societal attitudes toward themselves. It is another form of self-hate. Due to experiences oppression, empirically, it has been shown that internalized homophobia is related to negative mental health. Wow. Based on the psychological literature among the African Americans and LGBT individuals that are reviewed above, oppression has immense psychological and mental health implications. As discussed in part 1, Filipinos and Filipino Americans have extensive experiences of oppression, with the Filipino ethnicity and culture being historically and contemporarily attached to inferiority. Thus, similar to African Americans, LGBT individuals, and other historically and contemporarily oppressed groups, the psychological experiences and mental health of Filipinos and Filipino Americans may also be impacted by oppression. To this end, in part 2, we'll focus on colonial mentality or internalized oppression, the consequence of historical colonialism, which is a specific form of oppression, and contemporary oppression as experienced, expressed, and manifested by Filipinos and Filipino Americans. Part 2 will also discuss in detail how colonial mentality or internalized oppression plays a major role in psychological experiences and mental health of modern day Filipinos. That makes so much sense, that now kind of looking at it in a perspective of colorism. Yes, obviously colorism exists, because if you already have these feelings, if you're already so oppressed, and one of the things that the consequences are self-hate, and think of yourself as low, you're gonna express that through, as like one of the byproducts of that is colorism. My mind is blown right now. I didn't even know like they were already doing studies about that. It's amazing how, you know, and imagine, sorry, I'm going to just finish that first sentence. I'm just saying, like, it's just amazing how, like, not in a good way, it's just like, it amazes me how we sometimes think, right, like, we kind of mock, like, now, like, oh, SJWs, you guys are so sensitive, like, why there should be triggers. Like, triggers are important. People with trauma, there's certain triggers that they do get anxious. And because I was watching this the psychologist reacts on, you know, about triggers and stuff, and it's just like, it makes sense. I know it's easy for us sometimes to be like, oh, what's microaggression, who cares? But it does matter, you know, it does matter. And I don't think there's anything wrong with us being a little bit more sensitive of how other people are feeling, because it's hard for other people to relate, like the dominant group. And not all of them, some of them are great allies, but sometimes when I talk about representation, and you know, people in the dominant group would say, hey, you know what, like you have representation too. But then I think sometimes it's because they're not in that position. Sometimes they don't understand why, you know, Filipinos are or any Asian group, any minority group, are now finally saying, hey, we need better representation, because it does affect the way we think of ourselves. If, you know, at least have some fleshed out characters too, not very one-dimensional characters, or characters that only to move the plot line along. Anyways, it's just like kind of like, wow, this all makes sense now. This makes sense. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just do just one video for this, and then I will see you in the next video where I actually will read and discuss chapter 5. Okay, so if you want to watch chapter 5 and read along with me, and let's have a discussion down below, definitely don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you will be notified for my future videos. And comment down below experiences that you've had, you know, of someone not trying to understand you, like, because I think sometimes when you're in a conversation with someone who hasn't really experienced prejudice. It's really hard for them to understand, and I don't think it's our job to educate. But I think we've also have come such a long way in our society, and there will always be pushback, of course, but I think things are slowly getting better. I know sometimes it's so hard to see all the progress, but I think we will get there. I think we have to fight for it in terms of just demanding, and also we have to model as well. And so yeah, definitely comment down below your experiences, and like if you like this video, and I'll see you in my next video. So make sure you turn on that notification bell so you can read chapter 5 with me. Okay, bye.